was just winging it, so I really needed to have some stepping stones and somebody tell me what and how we need to do it. So in my team, Christy is the office manager, Lisa is with us, and Natalka is coming soon. They are both buyers and listing agents on the team. They both joined pretty recently. Lisa is the newest one. So it is very new to her too, all the negotiations. So hopefully I can teach you something you guys don't know. I'm originally from Romania, so as I said earlier, I talk fast and funny. But that experience of being from the Eastern Bloc, I look at things a little bit differently than here in America. So I was very surprised when my kids joined soccer that they all get a trophy for participating. Everybody's a winner. Guess what? In real life, not everybody's a winner. In real estate, actually, there's not even a second place. There's a first place. You're the winning bid, or you're the loser. Those are your options. So you have to work really, really hard at your offers to make sure that you are going to be the one who's going to win the bid, especially if you're going to multiple bidding. So the training material that they gave us here, for me, it has it a little bit backwards. I like to talk to the listing agent as soon as my client shows that they have interest in the property. I like to talk to the listing agent right away. Because sometimes by just talking to them and listening what the seller needs is, it's kind of like the job application. Then when you apply for the job and you look at what they're requiring, and then you suddenly type up your resume and you have all the skills that they require. It's exactly like that. So I don't know if you knew that, but NAR, the National Association of Realtors, in 2014 said that the second most important part for a buyer, what they're looking in their agent, is negotiation skills. So they want to know that you are their best advocate, and then you can fight for them. So that's very, very important, and you have to feel comfortable doing that, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the first requirement?
It's probably knowing the market.
No, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I was researching this subject, so I didn't I didn't get what the first one was, but I would assume it's probably knowing your area, being an expert in your area. But the second one is negotiation. So who has never negotiated a transaction? Anybody? Lisa. Okay. And Luke. Okay. So you'll see that probably at first you're going to feel intimidated by the other agent, and so don't ever let them know it's your first transaction, because they will chew you up. You know, if you're on a team, or if you have anybody in mind that is an expert in the industry and you want to talk to them first, do that. Don't necessarily give away that you are new, because then they are going to take you to the bank. Okay, so I have two examples here of if you were to show these two homes and your buyer decides that they want to make an offer, how would you do it and what would you do? Okay, so I'm going to give it out very quick and then we go practicing that way. Would you like to pass that around? We'll pass this one. Oh, let's start here too, and then everybody gets it. So the very first part to negotiations is to get the deal. So when the buyer says, I want to make an offer on this, and you present your offer and you win the bid and now you are suddenly under contract, that's the first part of the negotiations. The second part of your negotiations is when you have to negotiate not the initial terms, because you already negotiated it, but the inspection and the appraisal. So there's like 3 different steps to the negotiations process. First, we're going to walk through, and I wish we had a purchase agreement.
I do have one.
Do you have one? Can I have a copy of that? Perfect, thank you. Just so we can go through step by steps. Thank you so much. I got one. Thank you.
You got these? Okay.
There's some sitting here from Pete's, probably from Pete's forms class, some purchase agreements that you.
Okay.
Blank ones?
So can somebody tell me what the description of negotiation is? What does negotiation mean?
Come to an agreement.
Coming to an agreement. And do you think your sellers and your buyers, do they have the same interest in the agreement? No. Yeah, so they polar opposite. Yeah, so the seller always wants the most amount of money for the least amount of house, and the buyer always wants the most amount of house for the least amount of money. So their interest is never going to meet, and that's why you are in the middle to take the beating. I am a firm believer that our job is not to be realtors. Our job is to be negotiators, or being pretty much the mitigator in the middle to take the beating. I don't know what the number is, the percentage for if people were actually having to deal sellers and buyers directly with each other. When you involve ego and you involve bottom line, I don't know how many transactions would actually go through without a realtor. So I think negotiations is to find that common ground without, and still liking each other and still sitting at the same closing table at the end of the transaction. That's our job. Okay, so let's look at a purchase agreement. what would be the very first thing that you will have to negotiate? Actually, no, start with the listing things. So on the first, those two listings, they're both in Brighton, they're both about the same price range. What do you think the major difference is on those two listing tickets?
Square footage for one.
The house, number of the rooms,
But for your negotiation techniques, I guess, what would be the most determining factor on those two listing tickets?
that's the chart type.
Days on market.
Days on market. Yeah. So usually that's the first thing I look at when I look at the listing ticket. I don't look at anything else but days on market. The reason why is because usually anything research shows that if it has not sold in 90 days, something's wrong with it. Most of the time is the price, unless the home needs to be fixing up in. If they don't change something by the 90th day, it's never going to sell. So something at that point would need to change. And also the sellers at that point are desperate. They have had a home on the market for 70 some days. In today's market, they have to reduce it by the time or do something. Unless,
They just don't have a great willing to sell.
exactly.
They're not motivated.
Exactly, and I don't know if the law changed, but in the state of Michigan, I don't know if you guys knew this, but you can actually have two homes on the market and have it homesteaded as long as the second one is still actively on the market. Which means you can list your $200,000 home for $1 million, have it on the market for a year, and pay homesteading taxes on it. So, could be something like that. It could be that they're just not that determined. They maybe invested too much in the home, and if and when somebody is willing to pay for it, then they're going to sell. But most of the time, to use it for as your negotiation, days on market is very, very important because then you know how much wiggle room you have, how you can negotiate. One of the major questions on Instagram, I asked people what they would want to know about negotiations. Most of them said, what if my clients don't have the money? You go into negotiations and multiple bidding. What do you have as leverage when you don't have money? Then you have time. And that's when you need to call the sellers. I always call the sellers first to find out what's important to them. So if let's say the seller says, I would love to sell it and they agree on the price, but they say, but I need post-closing occupancy, I need to stay in the home for another 60 days before I find my next home, or if it's a relocation or whatever. And at that point you can say, my clients don't have money, but they have the time. They might even be allowed, like let's say if it's a younger couple or so and they can live at mom and dad's basement for a little longer, they might be able to allow them to live there for free. So those are huge. That time is money. So if you don't necessarily have money, but you have time to offer, you have that leverage over anybody else. That's why when deals go into multiple bidding, they don't say highest bid, it's best and highest, because sometimes the highest is not the best. So keep that in mind. So that's what, yeah.
Based on what you're saying, if the occupancy, I have a client now that is talking about, I told her if she has to have occupancy, that she will pay for those days. She don't want to pay, so what do you do?
So you have a seller?
Yes,
At that case, yeah.
about to, I'm meeting her tomorrow.
Yeah.
So on her case, she's scared of selling and not seeing where to move to, and I told her that I can get occupancy for her for like 60 days. So, but she will have to pay. She said, then the money is gone. I said, no.
So here's how you spin it. How much would it cost her to stay there and pay the mortgage and the rent, insurance and taxes and homeowners association?
Okay.
It's going to cost her the same exact thing with the buyers. There's no difference. She would be making a payment that month anyway, unless she owns it flat out. Does she own it flat out? If she owns the house with zero payment?
Yes, zero. She pays.
So that's what she's saying, she doesn't want to pay. So then your best, like you can still list it and see if somebody out there is, I don't want to use crazy, but crazy enough to settle with her. You know what I mean? Or you can, I don't know, let it go into multiple bidding and let somebody offer more than what it's worth, and at that point she gained what she would be losing by paying post-closing occupancy. But it's kind of the same thing. If she was to find a home on day one and move into the new home, she's going to have a mortgage unless she's paying that one off at the price that she's getting for this home.
She want to pay cash.
Yeah, she wants to pay cash. So there's a price for everything in life. Nothing's free. So if she wants to sell the home and move on in life and get a new one, then she's going to have to pay for the daily rate.
Yeah. I thought I can get her 30 days freedom, but the other 30 days she has to pay. So I have a buyer that is willing to do that.
Got
Let's see
it.
how it goes.
Yeah. Maybe you can go back to the buyers and see if there's any, did you exclude anything from the listing, a washer and dryer or anything like that?
Not yet.
No. So if there was
I
anything.
don't know how to spin that one because it's
So
not my first listing board. I'm not comfortable with listing yet, so I don't know. I don't understand exclusion yet.
Okay, so exclusions are, let's say, everything, so the way I was explained when I got my license, and I don't think they use that anymore, but if you were to hold the house upside down and shake it, If anything that would fall out, they can take it. And also personal things. So if there's personal photos on the wall, things like that, they can take. But anything that would stay in the home, anything that's built in, anything that's attached to the walls, including shower curtains, has to stay. Unless you excluded it when you listed it.
Oh,
So if she has a washer and dryer that she loves and she's not ready to part with, you can exclude it, and that's when you can throw it back into the deal. So if the buyer says, no, I'm not willing to let you stay in the home for free, then she says, okay, how about I'll give you the washer and dryer? I give you the washer and dryer and I stay in the home for free for 30 days. I mean, so there's always leverage. You just have to find that something that, you know, maybe you can hold back at front and then throw it back into the deal, then it feels like they just got a cookie.
And then just to clarify for Delight, if the seller is going to exclude some items, make sure you put that in the listing.
yeah.
Okay, or if it's something they don't want to leave, say it's a light fixture, have them swap it out before, because most times you put something as an exclusion, the buyer's gonna want it.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll use that as a negotiating tactic,
I
so.
got bidding that. I paid $600 for the washer and dryer because I did not ask for it when I was writing the purchase agreement, and the buyer saw it when I was showing the house. They said they wanted it was an agreement, and then, but Pete knows the agent refused to let go. I had to pay for that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what the thing is. You learn, and that's how you learn is on your mistakes the fastest.
Yeah.
Is I bought a septic inspection. That was my first time when I learned that an agent, if they bring a buyer from, so I do most of my business in Livingston County. We are septic and well mostly. I accepted an offer from an agent from Washington County, where in Washington County, septic and well is paid by the seller. We accepted the offer. They called me, hey, we did the inspection, where's the results of the septic and well? I said, oh, you were supposed to do that. They're like, no, it's spelled out in our purchase agreement that the seller to pay for it. Well, guess who paid for it? Me. So same thing, if you excluded something on your purchase agreement, or sorry, on your listing ticket, you want to make sure it's not included on your purchase agreement, because if it's included and you accepted it, you're buying a washer and dryer. So you always, that's why, as much as I love listings, because that's what brings the buyers, that multiplies your income, in the same time, reading agreements that are not a Keller or not a realistic one that I'm used to, I do not like it. It's a lot of reading and a lot of things that you can, it could be as simple as seller pay. When you're so used to purchaser pays, you just kind of skip through it, never realizing that you just made a $450 mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has happened to me before, where the buyer was supposed to pay for the survey of the property that I listed, and I didn't really go through the contract well enough, and they came back and told me, well, you know, our purchase agreement said you guys are gonna pay for it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how you learn. So let's go to the purchase agreement. So let's say your buyer wants to make an offer on that 445, and the property was on the market for 1 day versus 74. What would you recommend them to do on the one that was on the market for 1 day, and what would you recommend them to do that was on the market for 74 days?
For a market like this, they would give almost full offer, because
Full offer on the 1
if
day?
the house is very good and is a good location, it's gonna go into multiple offers.
Yeah. So if it goes to multiple offers, full price nowadays is not even enough. Sometimes going 10,000 over, it's not even enough. So usually what I do, if it has been on the market for over 30 days, I will do comps. I'll do comps pretty much anyway, just to know, but on the one that's been on the market for 70 some days, I definitely want to do comps, because I want to know how far are we from market, why hasn't it sold? You know, because sometimes you walk into the home and it looks perfectly fine. Oh, hey, Ali, when did you walk in?
A couple minutes ago.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm late.
You're fine, I didn't see you. So what I would want to do is do comps first to see how far you are, you know, from asking price, and then trying to convince them. Sometimes, as much as you try to explain to your buyers of what they should do, and then I never really tell them what they should do, is trying to just kind of say where the market is at today. Sometimes you have to let them lose a couple bids before they will take your word for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody, you know, they want to get the house, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it.
Yes.
So until they lose out, and people don't like losing. So everybody wants to be the winner, and you will see when you go into multiple bidding, even if your buyer said, I am not going over a penny over 440, as soon as it's multiple bidding, they're like, I'll pay 460. You know, they just want to get it. They don't want to lose. So on the one that's been on the market for 1 day, do comps, see how far you are. More than likely, full price is not going to win it if it's going to be multiple bidding. The one that's been on the market for 70 some days, definitely do comps and see how far you are from the market. At that point, you have some leverage with the sellers. Clearly, they don't have an offer. So you're not, and then the bad part, the part I never understood when it goes into multiple bidding, is that you're really taking that other agent's word for it, that there are other offers. Because they don't have to show it to you that there are other offers. So you could be bidding yourself out. You know what I mean? I wish there was, and hopefully in the future they're going to come up with something. What I usually do when we go into multiple bidding, I build it into our offer in the special notes on the last page, that I want, especially if you do an escalation clause, then I want proof of the first page of that purchase agreement, knowing that we bid out somebody from somewhere, not
Now,
myself.
how do you word that?
I usually just say usually I do that when we do escalation clause. Do you guys know what that is, an escalation clause? So what that is that, let's say your buyer is willing to offer on the 445, they're willing to offer 465, but they don't want to offer that up front. So what they mean by that is they say, okay, I'll offer 450 now with an escalation clause of $2,000 over the highest bid, but not more than 465. So that way, you know that I'm the winning bid no matter what, because I'm 2,000 above whoever is the highest bid. But at that point, you want proof that there was somebody else in the game. And you also want to cap it at somewhere, because you don't want some crazy offer at 550 and then you're now at 552. You know it's not going to appraise, and now you're bringing $100,000 cash to close. So you always want to have a difference in, to tap it somewhere. The only way you can do that, yes, go ahead.
So when you do an escalation clause, do you waive the appraisal, or do you still say, listen,
I try to leave it in the game. I try to leave it in the game unless my buyers have cash to work with, a ton of it, and they say, I don't care, I'll pay $465 for it no matter what. And that way you can remove it and you're really in the game.
Okay.
Because at that point the seller has nothing. So the best and highest really doesn't mean anything to the seller if you don't remove the contingency of the appraisal. Because you could offer 470 on a 445. If it's not going to appraise, you're really only offering where it's going to appraise. And so your offer at that point is not any higher than somebody who offered the 445. So what that means, do you understand that?
Not really for the escalation clause, but the last bidding I lost, we guaranteed 5,100 above the appraisal, not exceeding 160. The house was listed for 149,900, and my buyer said, he's comfortable paying,
10,000 over.
no, 5,100 above. I was thinking that nobody can beat that with 15,000 down payment. We still lost out, so maybe I should have asked for the other side and see who.
So sometimes, did you do comps on it?
Yeah, we did comps on it.
What is the comps?
150.
150.
Yeah, but he was ready to pay that.
So the issue is in that price range is that really they go into multiple bidding, and what happens is the listing agent take advantage of the market. They list it just a little low, so they let everybody go into and outbid each other, and they end up getting more for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And when you're bidding each other's out, they're doing that for the reason of finding that one person who's willing to pay for it, even by removing the contingency of the appraisal and getting more than market value.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why probably it could have been somebody who offered 150 for it, but removed the contingency appraisal, or they did cash for 7 days. Closing 7 days, so you don't know. Sometimes your highest bid, it's not necessarily the best bid for a seller.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was good. Why did you do 5,100? Just wondering.
Because it's 149,900. So if we pay 149,900 is 150. So if you pay 155, it's 5,100.
Got it. Okay. So that's for the
But it's a
escalation
guarantee,
clause.
though. It's a guarantee, so.
So the appraisal thing, the one you have to know about this part, the only way you can remove the contingency of the appraisal, if your client is willing and has the cash to bring to closing from market value, which is the appraised value, to what they offered. If they don't have cash to work with, you cannot do that escalation clause. You understand that, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it has to appraise. So if you offered 460 and it appraised at 445 and you didn't remove that, even if you built in that 2,000 escalation clause, your offer is really still 445.
So they don't have to have cash for the whole thing, they just have to
The
cash to
difference.
close the gap.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So from the 445 or whatever it's going to appraise at to the 460 what they offered, they have to have the cash
Plus
for it.
their other, whatever.
Yes,
equipment.
plus the down
Okay. All right.
payment, plus the closing cost. Yeah, so they would have to have more. And then the other resolution for the ones who don't necessarily have the money. So let's say they get pre-approved for a $200,000 mortgage and they can purchase for $200,000. At that point, with all the multiple biddings and stuff, you probably should start looking in the 150s and hopefully they find something in that price range that they like, and then you have 50,000 wiggle room to work with, to be able to bid higher and hope that it's going to appraise. Because if you're looking at 200, you really have nothing else to offer besides time. Okay? So on the purchase agreement, besides price, what is the next thing? Is the type of the mortgage that you're going to buy it on. So what, how many types of mortgages did you work with? Did you work with a VA? Rural development? Out here? No?
VA and, okay, I don't know about here, I would say.
Yeah, so VA is the Veterans of America. So they are one of the only loans that is 0% down and no PMI.
Yeah,
So
I know
it's
that one.
very beneficial to the veterans to do that, but it's not so beneficial when they go into multiple bidding. The seller more than likely is going to take another offer. So we actually had multiple times go into situations where you have to convince the veteran not to use their benefits if they want a house, because that they're not going to win it that way. Rural development is very similar to that, but I don't know how much of that is here. Most of my business is in Livingston County. So with rural development, they can also qualify for the loan, but they could qualify for 0% down based on their income. So those are the two that if your client doesn't have income, hopefully they qualify, doesn't have a lot of cash to work with, but they would qualify for a mortgage. Those are the two that you want to refer them to. Okay, is rural development or VA. And the next one is cash. Cash is the best.
FHA.
FHA and conventional. Yeah, or FHA 2 or 3K if the home needs some repairs. Has anybody done a FHA 2? Go ahead, you have a question?
Well, there was a certain amount that of money that had to go into the house if you get the 203K, correct? Did you tell me that one time?
There's
Yeah,
two types
so-
of 203s.
Yeah, so there's a new construction one now too. The 2 or 3K, what that means is that let's say the home qualifies for a type of loan, but it's really not in good condition. So in order to make it livable, you will say, okay, I'll buy it for $200,000, but I need to redo the kitchens and I need to redo the bathrooms and stuff like that. And then what you can do is to roll that into your mortgage with the hope that the future value is going to be there. So you would say, okay, I'll buy it for $200 after I do the kitchen and after I do the bathroom is going to worth $250. Will the future value be there? If it is, then you can roll the repairs into the mortgage and draw against your actual mortgage versus having to have $50,000 to put in a kitchen yourself. Something like that, simply put. Okay, the next one is the loan amount and then the down payment. You can do it both ways. You can do a $200,000 offer price with $180,000 for the loan amount and $20,000 down. Or you can say, I am going to do, a $200,000 mortgage with 10% down. That would be a $20,000, and then the rest of it would be your mortgage for $180,000. So however you want to fill that out. And if you can do a larger EMD and a larger down payment, of course you look more of that you have more of a solid buyer. So if they can do that, especially if you're going to multiple bidding, you want to do that.
And make sure you point that out to if you're representing a buyer, make it out to the seller. I just was involved in a deal a couple months ago. My buyer was putting half down, financing half, putting down 10,000 EMD. There were multiple offers. And when I submitted the offer and I called the agent, I said, understand my buyer's putting half down, we're submitting a large EMD, we will get this to the closing table, she's well qualified. That's something to think about, because it's no good accepting a higher offer if at the end you're not at the closing table. So,
Exactly.
so if you're gonna do that, make sure you specifically point that out. Just remind the agent, real friendly reminder.
Yeah. So I always do before I present my offer, I always call the agent back. So first what I do when we leave the showings and my client is interested, I say, hey, this is Gogo, I just want to tell you we are going to submit an offer. Is there anything you can share about the sellers that I should know? Then we can build it into a purchase agreement. What I mean by that is I want to kind of fill their stories and be like, okay, they have, kids, they really don't want to leave until the school is out, so which means we have 6 weeks, whatever the story may be, then I know they're probably going to need, because I know my lender I work with, we can close anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. So that means they need a 3 weeks post-closing occupancy. Maybe I can talk my clients into allow the sellers to stay in the home for that period of time. Or maybe I'll say, okay, we can throw in the 30 days, but you're going to do the PITI, the daily rate, to rent back from my client. So whatever it is, I just want to be able to make it more presentable for the seller, so then you don't have to do all that negotiations back and forth. I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to make an offer that the seller is going to be like, where do I sign? Okay? So then after you prepare the documents, I call the agent back and I spell it out literally. Say, hey, this is Gogo again, just wanting to let you know I just made a full price offer, or a $10,000 over asking price, or whatever your offer was. My client is more than qualified. It's with a lender that I've worked with multiple times in the past. they're putting, 20% down, it's a conventional loan, blah, 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 blah. You pretty much spell out all the details. And I usually say, hey, there's a special edition on the very back, don't miss it. We're offering $2,000 over the highest bid, but not more than this, but I will need proof of the highest bid, the first page of the purchase agreement, something like that. So then they know of what they're looking for. I love that when another agent does it for me too. They just spell out all the stuff. If you have a contingent offer, do you know what that is? When your buyer have to sell before they can buy. When you go into a multiple bidding situation, good luck with that. Don't even bid, because you're not going to get it. So in that scenario, you might as well just start looking for homes that have been on the market for at least 30 days. So you know that you're not bidding, you're not going to go into that situation. It's kind of hard in this market now. Okay. Okay, next one, closing. What do you usually put in there?
Inspection, please. An inspection period now that is dicey. So inspection, when inspection comes out, how do you manage the buyer to let go some, not to ask of repair for everything?
Okay, so especially if you went into multiple bidding and you win the bid and you get into the
I wasn't in
inspection,
multiple bidding. This one is a condo and there was no activity, so
no activity on it.
I was able to get 2,500 less than what my buyer even agreed to pay. So, and then now we're on inspection.
Yeah. So just depending, I usually tell my clients anything that's under 500 or anything that's over 500 is considered major, and for those we can go back to the seller. And there's 3 ways you can do that. You can ask the seller to do the repairs themselves before we close, and then you do your final walkthrough 2 days prior to closing.
No, the first thing you said, ask the seller to do what?
To do the repairs themselves.
Okay.
Not necessarily themselves, have it hired out by a professional, but do it before we close, so then my buyer doesn't have to deal with it after they move in. Okay, so then if you ask the sellers to do that, then you also want to build in into your purchase agreement or into your repair contingency removal. You want to build in, then you want the right to do a final walkthrough 2 days prior to closing to make sure that the work was actually done and it was done professionally and the repairs were made properly. Okay, so that's your first option. Second option, you can say, hey, the repairs altogether are about $7,000, whatever it may be. Can you please reduce the price by $7,000? But if they do that, that means that the buyer still needs to do those repairs when they move in. So the question is, do they have the $7,000? If they don't have the $7,000 to do the repairs, then you should probably ask for seller's concession. Do you know what seller's concessions are? Yeah. So seller's concessions are, so if your buyers were to bring $17,000 to close and now you got $7,000 seller's concession, that means they're bringing $10,000 to closing, which leaves $7,000 in their pockets. So with that $7,000, then they can do the repairs after closing. Okay? But now there's 2 kinds of repairs. There's some that you are perfectly fine to close with and then the buyer can take on the repairs after closing. And there's some that, depending on the type of mortgage, the work will have to be done before you can actually close. So if the home is not safe, there's no smoke detectors, or there's, mold in the home or something that your mortgage will not allow. For example, it's most of the times with veterans because the home has to be safe and sound for a veteran to live in it. So the VA would not allow the veteran to move in unless those repairs are made. So which means at that point that the seller will have to do it before closing, or the veteran cannot close.
This is a conventional loan, and then the city came out for a certificate of occupancy and failed them. So
Like a city cert?
Last Friday,
A city certificate? City cert, it's called?
Yeah, they failed. It was on Friday, so after the rain, I had to go on Sunday to check it out because the basement shows a crack. If it's leaking, it's not leaking. But then what the city points out, are they going to do it or how to?
So city certs are usually, I don't have any in our area, so we don't have city certificates in our area, so I probably shouldn't even talk about this. But I know in our purchase agreement, I think the seller pays for that, isn't it?
It's, you can write a purchase agreement either way. However, most people write the seller will repair, and get the city provide the city certificate for closing. But all that means is the city will not give a buyer occupancy until the repairs are done. So if it's something minor and the seller can take care of it right away and get it taken, have them do it, and then if not, then the seller's gonna have to sign off on it. And they'll actually have to sign.
Yeah, so pretty much that work has to be done.
But would that stop closing? That's what I wouldn't know.
Yes, it will stop closing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you need that certificate in order to get to the closing table. That's one of your documents.
And
So
then
that
if
work
they
would have to be
don't,
done.
if the seller doesn't want to do the repairs and the buyer wants to assume them, the buyer has to sign an ACR, which is an assumption of compliance responsibility. most cities that have a city certificate required also have the ACR option, so.
Yeah, we don't have
Sorry.
it. So no, you're fine. I have not done a deal actually with that. I have one now that, but of course, pouring rain Saturday morning, like pouring buckets. Inspection time. Find out that there is water damage in the home from the sliding door. The rain is running in to the basement. They never saw it because the basement's not finished. They have the insulation, so the inspector just removed the insulation to find out that it's all rotted, which means they have to take the deck off. They have to take the siding off. They have to like pretty much remove the door. It will have to be a dry day to redo all that. So we are talking thousands and thousands of dollars. Now the question is that covered by homeowners insurance? Because if it is, then maybe the seller can just apply for that, have the insurance cover it, have the repairs done. The question, how fast is that going to be done? Would the homeowners insurance actually, even if they cover it, would they cover it while the seller already moved out with the new buyers? So that's where we are at. So with every transaction, you are going to have a wrench thrown in the middle, and that's the part I love. I could never, no offense to everybody who does the same job day after day after day, I could never do it. I'm not the type of personality who can show up at 8 and leave at 4 and do whatever needs to get done, the same thing over and over again. So the part that I love about my job is that every single transaction is different. From every transaction, I learned something new. For me, it's all about, I feel like I'm going through this phase in life where my brain is a sponge. So I want to learn something. And you work with a different buyer and seller every single time. You might be working with a different lender, a different appraiser, a different inspector. You learn something new from every transaction, so it never gets boring, but it does get complicated at times. And I think you just need to figure out to be clever. Who do I call? Who knows what I don't know? Who can fix this? Somebody can. Every transaction can be fixed. It's just you need to, figure out, make sure everybody's willing to work with it. I just had one that fell apart. That's not the end of the world either. The roof had to be replaced. Seller wasn't willing to pay for it. Buyer wasn't willing to do the work. Why should they? It's on its last leg, 20 years old. Deal fell apart. So you're going to have all kinds of negotiation issues. And sometimes the best part when they start throwing the F-bombs, and if I could legally, and I can't, share some of the voicemails I kept just for the fun, for the future, it's fun. So what you need to learn is to not take it personally. I used to cry over real estate transactions, like literally go home, put the blanket over my head and sob until I fell asleep and woke up the next morning. And don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. It is not your fault. The roof being old and the buyer's not willing to buy it and the seller not willing to repair it, it is not your fault. It has nothing to do with your ability to market it, your ability to sell it, your ability to negotiate it. There are just certain things that are going to fall apart even after all that hard work you did. So don't cry over it. Somebody else are going to buy it. We literally relisted it this morning and we have a showing on it, and they already viewed the attached docs, which is a good deal. You know what that means if somebody views your attached docs. So just don't ever give up on it. You're going to do it again and sell it again and you'll be fine.
May I?
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of roofs,
Yeah.
If you're representing a buyer in this area, understand that Westland has a roof letter. You need to have a letter that shows for closing that the buyer is aware of the condition of the roof.
Yeah, that's
Really?
what they pointed
Yes.
out. That was what they
Well,
pointed
Well, because
out.
they don't want to send the inspectors, the city inspectors out there because they're not insured, so that's why they have that.
Yeah, that's what they put on.
Really?
So that
Is
you
that
know
why Westland has that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing.
Wayne.
Really? I saw that on who?
Now you have to
Did
sign.
David close on the Westland one? Who closed on the
Yeah.
Westland one? Because he
Yeah.
had to put that.
Yeah, this one is on Westland. They said that it's one of the checkups that the buyer has to sign that he's accepting the roof as it is. But
Yes,
if
I think it was David.
Yeah, I think
it
so
was David
too.
who closed David, one of our guy in the team, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. I've never seen one in my
Mm-hmm.
entire life, but just go in and sign it, I guess. They know they did an inspection, so they should know the condition of that. So the closing, 30 days to 45 days is usually what I put in. Or you can do it on or before a certain day, or you can do it from a certain day to a certain day. So you might say Monday of this week until on Friday of the same week. So then you have a few days to fall, then you can work around the closing date. Sometimes you can move it up if the seller is able to move out early. Sometimes you can, extend it. Ideally, everybody wants to, stick to that date, and if you have to, then you can do an extension. Have everybody agree to it and sign it. Okay, the occupancy. This is where the PITI comes in, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So the way they calculate that is, if you're on the listing side or buy side, really it doesn't matter, but the buyer's lender is going to calculate the PITI. So if you are on the buy side, you call the lender and say, hey, we have an offer accepted on this home. We agreed to a 30-day post-closing occupancy. Can you tell me what the daily rate is? And the lender is going to take the buyer's mortgage, taxes, insurance, and homeowners association in calculation. They're going to divide that by 30, give you a daily rate. Then you call the listing agent and say, hey, the daily rate is $64. Then they're going to hold that money. They're going to calculate that the 64 by 30, hold that money in escrow up front, so you close. That money is going to be collected from the seller's profits. They're going to hold it in escrow in a title company, and then they do a final walkthrough again or a key exchange form on the day when they move out. They make sure the home is in good condition. If it is, then the seller is going to pay the buyer for that amount of stay. Bye. Have fun.
Thank you.
And then also, if you end up doing a post-closing occupancy, what I strongly recommend is to also do a damage deposit. I always do, the two kind of go hand in hand together. The damage deposit, why you want to do that is because you close, the buyer assumes the new home and the payment and all that, but the seller has not moved out yet. So you don't know what condition they're going to leave the home when they do move out finally. And what if they take all the appliances and the speakers from the walls, or, you know, door frames and everything, plumbing from the house. So you want to make sure that you include a damage deposit. So what happens is that when they do the final walkthrough, when they are finally ready to exchange keys, you make sure the home is in good condition. If it's not, then you're going to hold, you know, you're going to be able to pay for those repairs from the money that you held back. The sellers don't really want to agree to a damage deposit, but if you're on the buy side, I strongly recommend that you do that.
How much would you do?
Depending on the size of the home, if it's a regular size home, you know, I usually do 500. If it's something larger, 1,000, 1,500. Also, if you have a pool, if you're purchasing a home with a pool, especially if you're doing it in the winter where it cannot be inspected, you want to do a pool addendum, which states that you want to hold 1,500, 2,000 or whatever from the seller's profit until the pool is able to be inspected and it's in working condition, and if and when it is, then that money is going to be released back to the seller. Okay, you always want to do that with a pool. Pools are expensive, so if you have a pool, make sure you have a pool addendum. Okay.
How long do you usually give for the inspection? Do you have 7 days or 10 days or?
The regular inspection 7. If you end up doing an addendum like a pool addendum, I sold one in December. We gave them until June 1st.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to do it, because you can't really open a pool in, you know, in here for months and months and months. So just depending on what you're giving it. But on the purchase agreement, I do 7 days for the inspection, 2 and 2. So the 2 days is for the buyer after they do the inspection to be able to figure out what they're going to do with the results, and then the seller also has 2 days to think about what they are going to do with, if they're willing or not to do the repairs. In our area, again, I don't know, do you guys have radon this way?
Sometimes.
You do?
People
Yeah.
test it, but yeah, where you're working it's more
Yeah,
prevalent.
so we have about, I would say probably 80% of the homes have radon where we live. And also the water test results. So the water also takes about 2 days to come back. So if you're doing the inspection and you know it's a Friday, you know you're not gonna get your water back probably until Tuesday. So then you wanna do the more than 2 days at that point for the buyer to get back. With the radon, the best thing is to get the inspector to go out prior to the inspection. So it takes 3 days for the radon to be back. So for example, we had one Saturday, they went out on Tuesday, they put the radon machine down in the basement, and then when we do the inspection, then they're actually going to already have the results for the radon.
Who pays for the radon?
Buyer. Yeah. I mean, I always make the buyer. I make the buyer, but most of the time the buyer pays for it, and then if there's radon, then the seller will mitigate it. That is, I want to say it's about $1,000.
Yeah, anywhere from 8 to 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever shorten your inspection period on multiple offers, or do you always leave it at 7?
So you can, but the problem with that, inspectors are so busy. I usually call the agent and say, hey, listen, we will do the inspection in 2 days if I can have the inspector to come out. I left 7 on the agreement because they are so busy. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but in the state of Michigan, you can do your own inspection. Of course, if you're spending $500,000, I recommend hire somebody who's professional and they know what they're doing, and they have all the gadgets and gizmos of everything that needs to get done. But if you want to save money on that, you can. You can also remove the contingency altogether.
Do you have your buyers sign the inspection acceptance form?
Meaning?
A waiver?
The waiver? I usually, if they
It's not
decide.
a waiver, it's a form that says the buyer accepts the results of the inspection and can move forward with the purchase of the sale.
Yeah, so after the inspection, I always do the contingency removal. Is that what you mean? I always do.
Yeah, some call it, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, there's a lot of lingo at Keller and I haven't learned yet. I still
That's the
talk
name of
of
the form, so I don't know.
got it, okay. So I call it a repair contingent or an inspection contingency removal. I always do. Some lenders require it, some don't. It's just habit. Then I do, and I want to cover my behind.
It's a CYA form.
Yeah, and I also do, if my buyers decide that they want to remove the contingency altogether, guess what I do? I send them an email. Even though they told me over the phone, I send them an email just to double check. I want to let you know that I did let you know that it's very, very important that you do an inspection and you decided that you're going to remove it. I don't ever want to be held responsible. I don't want them to say, I had no idea, she never told me. You know what I mean? And then you find out that the septic field needs to be replaced and now it's $40,000. So I always like to cover myself. Even if I talk to an agent, I just did it this morning, with the water damage issue that I just told you about. Even though we agreed verbally, I followed up with an email. Hey, just to follow up, so we have it in writing. You guys are okay. As soon as we hear back from the insurance company, we are already out of contract with the 2 days because insurance companies are not that fast to get back to you. I just want to make sure that we have it in writing, that you and your seller agree to just hold on until we hear back from the insurance company. And then she responded, yes. So that way you sleep better at night. I like to cover my everything in writing. You know, anything you have, just follow up with an email to make sure you have it in writing.
So septic, do you advise the buyer to do a septic inspection regardless?
If it's septic and well, yes. Septic is very expensive if it's not working properly. So you definitely want to. And what if your sellers haven't flushed in the last 20 years? What if there was a single guy living there, it's his retirement home, he hasn't flushed it because it was only him, and now a family with 7 kids and cats and a dog moving in, and it's going to crash. You know what I mean? So I always recommend that.
I have a horror story if I can share that with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For septic tanks. So I had I was representing a buyer on a house in Farmington, and me personally, I would have run screaming from the house. It just needed a lot of work, but he just kept saying, I can fix it, I can fix it, I can fix it. Found out it had a septic tank, it had city water, but it had a septic. He's like, nah, it's okay. He says, I can fix that. I've replaced one on the farm before. This guy, nothing fazed this guy. It's a Fannie Mae house. The septic failed. Contacted the city, and the city wanted the buyer, the owner, to connect to the main line, which is on Farmington Road, and the house is on Farmington Road. Not a big deal. However, they also wanted the buyer to sign a form that said when the city or the county puts a sewer line to the south of the property for the road that was on the south side of the property and the 4 or 5 houses down that road, that the buyer will disconnect from the original line and connect to the new line.
Cost how much?
The original cost, I think, to connect to the one on Farmington Road was $60,000.
Wow.
Because they had to dig up Farmington Road because it was on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, so usually there is
Do your due diligence.
there are clause in there that the current owner can skip their grandfathered in, but the new owner sometimes is forced. They don't have a choice. So there are things like that. Also with special addendums, that's the one thing I forgot to tell you. With special addendums, I always look at it. I don't know out here because with city, I don't know how much special addendum there is, but out in the country, you know, if they paved the roads or they brought in natural gas or whatever the situation was for that area, you end up paying it in your taxes for a very long period of time. Now, sometimes what the sellers want to do when they sell their home is, most of the time the seller should pay that off at closing, but there are times when they make the buyer to assume. And if there's special assessments on there and you just kind of overlook that, we could be talking $60,000 the buyer to assume on top of the price of the home, which have to be paid off at closing. So, you know, I mean, that kind of things you always want to look at. So the very first thing.
Sorry, the leasing agent, and then I will call the city.
You call the city?
And
Yeah,
so
I just
what
look
is
at the
special
taxes.
assessment?
So when you look at the listing ticket, there's like systems I do, there's methods. The first thing I look is, of course, look over all the details. Then you go down to the property ID. You click the property ID, you open it up, and it will show you public records on the property. It will show you the taxes, when were they paid, what is the winter taxes, what is the summer taxes, is it homesteaded or not. Also with the non-homesteaded taxes, do you guys understand that? When you're looking at a property, is both of them are homesteaded here? Yes and yes. Okay, so for example, they're both homesteaded, so I can't use these as example, but when you look at your taxes, you'll see the summer taxes and winter taxes, and then your buyer says, oh my gosh, I can't afford $5,000 for taxes, what's wrong with this home? and then you look at it, oh, it's not homesteaded. So then you can say, okay, never mind, it's going to be about 40% less when you homestead it when you move in. So if the home that they're buying is not lived in and owned by, it could be a rental property, it could be a second home, it could be that they already moved on and homesteaded their new home. What happens is, at that point, their taxes will go down when they homestead it. So that's why you want to look at it, yes or no.
Do you ever ask, when you're representing a buyer for a property that's not homesteaded, do you ever ask that at closing, the buyer's prorations are calculated at the homestead rate and the seller will make up the difference?
I have not, but I think that's fair. You know, I don't think it's fair for my buyers to be paying for that. I feel the same way with special assessments. I don't think the seller should have to pay it off. If that's a 16-year special assessment, that 6 years when, 6 years they paid for it while they lived in it, now there's 10 years they're not going to live in it, the new buyer is going to benefit from it, why is the seller paying it off? But it is how the system is built. I feel the same way with the non-homesteaded taxes. When your buyer is closing, here we are prorated, we prepay our taxes, which means that your seller has to be credited, your seller has to be credited back at closing, which your buyer will pay for the taxes for the amount of time that the seller prepaid. From the date that they're moving in, they have to pay for that tax back. Now, it's not fair to the buyer who's going to move in with their kids and cats and dogs as a homesteaded person to pay the seller for an investment property for non-homesteaded taxes. But even though it's built this way, that the buyer is to credit the seller back. But yes, you could build that in as a special, notes on the purchase agreement as a condition. Yeah, you could. I've never done it, but I felt like it would be fair. Yeah. So that's where you're going to find out public records, is when you click the property ID down here. The easiest way. You can also go into public records and look it up based on the address or the seller's last name or first name. Okay, so we talked about the PITI. You have the seller calculated. The additional security, this is where you can use that damage deposit, for example, $500. If tenants are occupying the property, my recommendation, not to ever buy a house that there are tenants in it. That's just my 2 cents on it. You're going to end up with an eviction and go through all the process, and guess who's paying for it? You are. So buy a rental property, sure, don't buy it with tenants in it, but that's just my 2 cents. But we do have it on here if you were to buy a property with tenants in it. So the taxes and assessments is right here. What we talked about is section 4. The home warranty, do you guys do the home warranty? You can do it up front, you can decline it altogether, have the seller pay for it, have the buyer pay for it, or they can do it through Consumers Energy DT, however they want to do it. So just depending, if you're going into multiple situation, multiple bidding, don't ask for it, because that's just one more thing the seller's going to look at it. Nope, $500, not it. So just have them decline at that point. If it's a home that maybe, so we do it multiple. AC units are also that FH territory. You can't really inspect them in the winter. So if you're selling a home, and ACs can be expensive, you're talking about $6,000. Yeah, so the buyer's like, I can inspect it, so what if it's not working? Now spring comes around and I'm suddenly pitching out $6,000. At that point, you can go to the seller and say, hey, I know you're not offering the home warranty. Your AC looks like it's kind of on its last leg. We can inspect it. Would you be willing to pay for the home protection plan? And at that point, that not only would cover the AC unit, but it would cover everything else in the home. Sub pumps are another thing in my neck of the woods, and these things are good for. Any appliances really they would cover. Okay, so if they can't fix it, they replace it. The agency, so you just disclose who are you representing, and that's how you are going to get paid. In the end of the transaction, you're just disclosing that you're representing the buyer. Seller's disclosure and the lead-based PIN disclosure, you have to disclose both of those even if the home was built after 1979. The seller just going to say there's no knowledge of anything, but all parties will still have to sign an initial. The inspection of the property, and this is where you do, we were talking about that I do 7, 2, and 2, but you can do 7, 3, and 3 based on this purchase agreement right here, or you can waive it all together. But if you're waiving it all together, cover yourself and have your buyers put it in writing that you did tell them that they should get one. Just my 2 cents. City cert, we covered that. Flood certificate, final walkthrough. Anybody does final walkthroughs? Most of your clients want to do it, isn't it? Yeah, it's good to do. I literally had one, I am not kidding you, talking about funny stories. Dirty dishes were still in the dishwasher. They literally left everything in the home that they didn't need anymore. Forks, knives, paints in the basement. I mean, carpet pieces that they replaced the carpeting, all the old carpeting was in the basement in a mountain. for my clients to deal with it. So at that point, the reason why you do a final walkthrough, not only that you want to make sure the home is in good condition, but also that you have some leverage. Because at that point, you call the listing agent and say, guess who's not showing up at closing? Us. You guys come back, you clean it out, review it again. When it's in good condition, we'll show up at the closing table. So that's one of the reasons why it's built in there, is for you to have some leverage and not having to, because there's many things you can't get rid of. So like electrical stuff or old computers or paint, you know, your buyer end up paying for removal of hazardous material for something that's not even his. You know what I mean? So that's the seller's expense. Take all your crap with you. You're moving out, all I want is the 4 walls. So you want to do a final walkthrough, and you always want to build it into your purchase agreement. So your buyer has the right to do that.
So the security deposit can be used to remove those things as well?
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Or are you saying that there's a different clause that you put in the PA?
No,
to cover
it's just
that
that it's built into our purchase agreement 2 days prior to closing. I don't usually do the damage deposit unless we are doing a post-closing occupancy. That's the only time I usually build it in, but you could put in there $500 just to make sure that the home is going to be in good condition, and the seller is going to get that money back. But they kind of also get offended by it, of like, what do you think I'm gonna like ruin the home when I move out? You know what I mean? So it's kind of that they want all the money they can get.
I mean, you can always put it in as a condition. I've done it sometimes. I just put in there, our purchase agreement used to say that the seller will leave the property in broom clean condition. When they redid our PA a few years ago, they took it out. Well, I don't know. So you can put that in as a condition. The seller will leave the property in broom clean condition. Or because people, especially if your buyer's buying a home and there's a ton of paint in the basement, they like to leave it because, oh, you know, the buyer might want it. No.
Mm-hmm.
Put it right in the PA. Seller will remove, you know, paints, you know, hazardous material, blah, 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 and leave it in a room clean condition.
Yeah, and I think the issue why they may have removed that in the past is because, what would you say clean is on the spectrum of 0 to 100 after all the homes you have shown? I've shown a home before, I could not find the fireplace in the living room. The listing ticket said the home has a fireplace. It had shit to the freaking ceiling. I couldn't find a fireplace in the house. I could have what is it called? Grown flowers probably in the dirt going down to the basement on the staircase. I don't think that home has ever been vacuumed since the seller owned it. So I think clean it's a long spectrum for how I like my house clean and how some people like their house clean. So I think that's the issue. And in the final walkthrough, you just go in there and say, this is exactly what I need you to do. And then when it's done, then you close.
Well, can I ask a question? So what's your recourse? So if you go to a final walkthrough and maybe you go the day of the closing, because they haven't moved out before that or
Yeah.
whatever, and then you find that they left behind some stuff or that you know, I don't know what, they took something
Or they
weren't
didn't,
supposed to,
where the
you
wash and
know,
dryer were supposed to be there and
so
it's not
what's your
there.
recourse at that point?
And you call the listing agent and you say, we are not coming to the closing table until you guys come back. It's put in the condition that it's supposed to be in, and then I'll see you at closing. Yeah, so you have that leverage of like, you know, your buyer doesn't have to buy something that is not in the condition as when they walk through, or doesn't have everything that was included on the purchase agreement.
So at that point, do you move the closing forward or?
Yeah, you just don't close until everything's taken. Usually they take care of it in the same day. They'll come and clean it out, and you, instead of an 11 o'clock closing, you do a 3, 4 o'clock closing. It did not happen to me very often, but you just want to, you know, most people are nice. You know, they would want to do what they would want to receive on the receiving end. So you're probably not going to run into that very often. But if it's a home that was iffish in the first place, you wanna. I shown one. Have you ever shown one that you question if you should or should not call 911? I did. So this home, I am not kidding you. You walk in on the front door, carpet. There's blood all the way from the living room through the dining room to the kitchen.
Why would they put that kind of house in the market?
There's this cage in the living room that looks like a sauna. Locks only from the outside, of course, with a note on it that said, this is where we lock in our handicapped child. There's no toys in the home, no kids' clothes in the home, nothing but baby bottles. So I did call 911. Because I don't want to see that on the news 2 years from now and be like, I could have done something.
Yeah, I'll call
You know what I mean? So I'd rather sleep good at night and make that call and be like, maybe I'm stupid and there's no freezer in the basement. You know what I mean? But, you know, if anything like that happens, make that call. Hi, Natalka.
Hi, I've been watching.
Oh, you did? Right. Welcome. Okay. Large parts here. So on the buy side, administrative and compliance fee, that's pretty much the only fee that your buyer pays on your end when you're on the buy side. Your commission comes from the seller. That's why you have to have a buyer's agency agreement and prove to the seller that you're representing the buyers, and then they're going to pay you. On this one, you have to agree to electronic signature. I'm wondering at what point they're going to remove that from our purchase agreement. You know, they have to, even at closings nowadays, you'll see you have to sign in blue, so they know which one is the original versus which one is a copy. I sometimes make it on my purchase agreements. If I'm signing that, you know, if I'm signing an actual person, which we used to at my old brokerage, I have not done an electronic signatures until we got here. It was like a whole different ballgame. When we got here, we used to do everything, just email over the offer, scan it back to me when you sign, kind of deal, or sign in person. So we learned a lot with the dot-loop systems, and I love it. But I'm surprised that they do have to agree that they're willing to take an electronic signature.
Where is that? I don't see it.
The 25, hold on, the 24.
Facsimiles and electronic signatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, they consider it legally binding. Earnest money deposit. So on our agreement now, I love it that you can actually present an EMD after of the acceptance of the offer, which is nice because you don't want to take a $5,000 check from your buyer, put it in escrow. You know, that money is going to be deposited right away. And then if that transaction doesn't go through, they're not going to see that money for 10 to 14 days before you can release it back to them, or we hold on to it for the whole time until they find the next home. So it's kind of awesome that you can do it after your offer is accepted.
So how do you deal with a situation where you make an offer,
Mm-hmm.
and then for whatever reason, your client, your buyer, decides, well, you know, I have a change of thought and a change of mind, and I don't want to go through with the deal. You're pretty much stuck holding the bag.
I
You
had
don't really
one.
have-
I had one literally. He had a dream. Multiple bidding. I did everything I can to win the bid. Guess who did? You did. You won it. All good. Next morning I wake up to a text message. I had a bad dream. I can't have that house anymore. So I'm like, now I need to call the listing agent and tell him that my buyer, it's not financial, it's not nothing, but a gut-wrenching feeling or a bad dream he had about the house that he can't have it anymore. And guess what? That's not a clause in our purchase agreement. So technically and legally, you need to buy this house. So at that point, you need to find a real reason of why they can't purchase it anymore. So it's usually financing, you know, or you go through the inspection, you pay for the inspection, and then you find something wrong at inspection time.
So with the financing, don't they have to come up with a letter stating that they were denied? But if that's not the case,
They could have, but you usually don't get that far. You usually do an inspection and you find something drastically wrong with the home that your buyer doesn't feel comfortable with. But sometimes it can be as simple as just call the other agent, tell them the truth, and they're like, you know what, instead of going through that 7 to 10 days until you get back to me until the inspection, and now the home has been off the market for 10 days, just be honest and see where that takes you. That's what I did, and they just said, yeah, thank you, we have 7 other offers to reach back to, so somebody else got the other deal.
Okay. Had it not gone that way, your client would have had to.
Technically and
do the
legally, yeah,
inspection.
they have a fully binding purchase agreement, and having a dream over a house, it's not a clause in our purchase agreement. Yeah, so if the seller wanted to hold them to it, they could have.
Since you said that they can do, they're not required to do a certified inspector.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can just use that and say, we went in there, they're not happy with it, and you don't even have to report what was wrong, correct? I mean,
No.
technically,
I
you
mean, the
don't
seller
have to.
would probably want to know at that point, and you would say that, you know, whatever the truth is, if they truly did an inspection, you're going to have something that the buyer doesn't
Right.
feel comfortable with. Maybe the windows are too old.
Mhm.
Maybe there is bats in the roof or black mold in the basement or whatever. You can find something. Radon, arsenic, something that's hazardous or they just don't feel comfortable with. Maybe you can say, whatever, they drove to the neighborhood and they don't feel they are safe.
It is also my understanding that you you really don't need a reason to back out if an inspection is done. Just based on the inspection, you call them, well, we
They're
did
not satisfied.
do the
Yeah.
inspection, we're unsatisfied with it, and we're backing off. You don't
Yeah.
have to go into detailed explanation about
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so if you click that you bring EMD after the offer is accepted, do you still tell them how much the EMD is gonna be here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you always have to disclose how much that is because that's one of your winning power.
Okay.
Showing a higher EMD shows that A, they have more skin in the game, and B, that they can afford it. They have cash to work with. Because the EMD is going to be deposited right away, which means they have to have that cash in the bank account.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing you have to ask your clients and make sure that they actually have that money in their account, because as soon as you get that check, it's going to be deposited. So just make sure that they have what they're offering. It's not monopoly money.
It also helps
What's the highest
showing.
EMD you've ever seen?
I had a $79,000 non-refundable EMD.
Yeah, me too. I had
Non-refundable?
Non-refundable.
And
it wasn't even necessary, it wasn't a multiple bidding, it was a cash buyer, and they
Yes.
said, and I don't know, why 79?
Yeah.
Why not 70,
Yeah.
80?
Yeah.
79, okay, sure. But you can get it, in any way. When they're certain they want this house and whatever it's going to take to get it, you can also make it non-refundable. So then your seller knows they are truly in the game, because they don't get that money back. I have never, even though we have this built into our purchase agreement, I have never, ever had anyone lose their EMD. It's very hard. I have never had a seller who was able to keep it either. So I think it's almost like a formality that we have it built into our purchase agreement. We have so many clauses based on the buyer can walk away that the seller really almost, unless you buy literally, you can't find them and they went to Hawaii to live it up, maybe then they could lose their EMD, but I have never had a seller be able to keep one.
I had one that she was a 21-year-old twin, she just flaked, and she decided she wasn't gonna do it. It was like, you're not getting it back, I'm gonna fight for you.
Yeah. So I don't, even then, did you release it, or did she lose it?
Oh, no, she lost it. I told
Did
her
she?
I told her there was no option.
I mean, truly they could, but
Right.
at that point they're like, I lost my job, I'm sick,
No, she's just like, I'm a
something.
twin.
I'm just a millennial. I had a millennial story today. No offense to millennials, Lisa. You're an awesome millennial. You're representing them all well. But yeah, for me it's like common courtesy. I don't think it's part of the millennial generation. And it just blows my mind how the please and thank you, it's not, I somehow missed their vocabulary. So no offense, that has nothing to do with negotiating here. Additional conditions, so 30, that's what you would be building in anything that's not part of your purchase agreement. You would literally spell it out. And by literally, so for example, I had a situation where the gutter, what are those called? Where the rain runs down? Downspout. The downspout was not 5 feet away from the home. So otherwise you're gonna end up with basement issues and stuff like that, so they need to be taken care of. So they need to put an extension on there. Well, I didn't spell it out to dig it under the sidewalk. We show up at final walkthrough and guess what? Oh, there's an extension. Oh, yeah, right there. That's smack middle across 2 different ways across the sidewalk in the front part of the house. But you have to walk over. Guess whose fault it is? I just said the seller to take care of the extension. Well, they did. They took care of it. So you have to be literal. For example, radon mitigation. If you just put in seller to cover the cost of radon mitigation or have a radon mitigation system installed, they're gonna go to YouTube and Home Depot for $300 and they are gonna mitigate that radon themselves. And is that done properly? I didn't ask for it to be done professionally and to provide invoice. So you have to be literal in a transaction because you are the one who's going to get burned. The seller's not going to want to cover it, the buyer's not going to want to cover it because the purchase agreement says this and that's all I need to do. So mitigation done, it's done. So you make sure that you sell it's done professionally by a licensed and insured, I don't know, radon mitigator or who they are. So just spell out everything. Anything else, so any conditions that you're removing, so if you're removing the inspection contingency, or if you're removing the appraisal contingency, or if you're removing anything that's built into our purchase agreement organically, then you have to remove it in the bottom right here, okay? And I also put it in an email, and I call the agent and leave a voicemail, or I'll tell them in person. I'll spell it out. I don't know with you guys, but when we started with the dot loop here, our original PA already had the bottom line signature on there where it pulls the information. I don't like to have it that way. So what happens is you make your offer and then your purchaser signs here, you sign here, you present it to the seller. And then the seller accepts your offer or counters or whatever, you agree, you negotiate all that out, then the listing agent signs here and then the seller sign here. Well, if this already bottom line when you presented your offer, that means your buyer is accepting the seller's response, whatever that response may be. Remove that. I don't think that's a good idea. You bottom line it after you negotiated everything, after the conditions are, agreed upon, and then they bottom line it. And from that moment on, you have a binding purchase agreement, not until then. So you have to have what this signature means in the bottom. After your purchaser signs it, then the seller signs it. They have to sign it again to be. That's pretty much them showing that they're aware that the seller accepted their offer. I'm sure somebody got burned.
Either with or without changes.
Exactly. So that's just proof that they know what the counter offer was, if there was any, and they're accepting the offer either way. Okay? And bill of sale. So if there's anything in the home that your purchasers want, by the way, don't do this. Let them do it outside of the transaction. If you put anything in a bill of sale, it will have to be appraised. And who's paying for that? And if it's a couch, really, how much is a couch or a used couch? Who's going to put a value on that? So if there's anything that, let's say there's a pool table, let's say there is a ping pong table, whatever it is that your purchaser wants and the seller is willing to give away, usually what I do, I have them do that outside of the transaction. I don't share their information until we went through all the contingencies. So if the inspections was met and we negotiate it out and we're moving forward, then we move on to the appraisal comes back at value and we're moving forward. At that point, I give them their information and they can negotiate out all the parts to the bill of sale that they're agreed to do outside of the transaction. I don't want to be responsible if that couch is have bed bugs in it when the purchaser moves in or fully dug here. You know what I mean? So if there's anything on there that your purchaser wants, just have them do it outside of the transaction. But if you end up doing it, there's a paper for that called the bill of sale. Okay? I don't like that.
I got a question about the bottom line.
Yeah.
Now, the bottom line, if I understand you correctly, that has nothing to do with the inspection.
No, the bottom line means that you have a fully executed purchase agreement.
Okay.
That means that all parties agrees to all parts of the contract.
Meaning the after inspection and everything?
No, that's when you have an accepted. You don't even do the inspection until you have a bottom line.
Okay.
So you make your offer with the purchaser and your signature on it. You present it to the listing side. Listing agent calls you, negotiate out the terms. If anything needs to be changed, the changes are going to be made. Everybody initials the changes, then the seller signs. When the seller signs and everybody initialed, you have the purchaser bottom line on the bottom to show that they agree to all the changes and they understand that their offer is accepted.
Okay, and that doesn't have anything to do with inspection at a later date if it comes back and my buyer says, for this reason, I just want to walk away.
So you can't even do an inspection until you have a fully executed purchase agreement.
Right.
At that point, you can do an inspection, but that is a contingency in our purchase agreement. So whatever the results may be, your purchaser can walk away, still continue on as the seller to fix it, reduce the price, give them the seller's credit, whatever it may be, it's a condition.
Isn't that bottom line, isn't all date and time stamped?
Yes.
Well, you just reinitial the bottom line because it would change, any change in the document has to be reinitialed.
So if, I personally still don't like it on there, but yes,
Okay.
everything is date stamped. The other thing is, you don't have to have a bottom line if there are no changes made to your original purchase agreement. If the seller says, I take it as is, they just sign you good. But if the seller counters with any changes to, could be as simple as the closing date, plus minus 5 days, whatever, you just have to make them sign and everybody agrees that there was a change made and they all agreed to that change. Okay? Okay, FHE addendum. So if you're making an FHE offer, you have to do an FHE addendum, which, hi, my name is Gogo, and I admit that I don't ever do that. I always forget. The lender won't let you forget it. So the lender will send it over before closing and say, hey, there's an addendum that needs to be signed. With an FHE addendum, it's been so long, I don't even know. There's the offer price, so which states that your purchaser does not have to buy the home if it doesn't appraise. Okay, so that's the first appraised value contingency. The seller contribution, if there's any repairs to need to be made to the home, who's covering what, how much. So usually you build in maybe the required repairs. So the FHA standard and conventional standards, conventional pretty much lets you to get away with anything, doesn't have to have smoke detectors or whatever. The FHA is a little bit stricter. So which means is that if it doesn't have that certain thing that qualifies the home for that mortgage, the seller has to put that certain thing in the home, so then your purchaser can actually get a mortgage on that home. So that's where you would build in for the FHA or VA required repairs. I usually put 500, which means is that if there's no HDFIs or whatever those outlet plugs called, usually those are the ones that will, or a smoke detector that will make your deal fall apart, that the seller is willing to pay for those FHA required repairs. Not what the buyer requires based on the inspection, but what the mortgage requires based on the standards, up to 500. Usually I do 500. And then also, there's another catch in there. So if there's an FHA required repair and the repair was made, that means that the appraiser has to go back and make sure that that repair was made and it was made properly. Who's paying for that?